Hello everyone, my name is Ahmad Nabil and I'm thrilled to be here as a photography student. Photography has been my passion for as long as I can remember, and being able to pursue it as a student is a dream come true. I am currently enrolled in PCT, where I am honing my skills in both digital and analog photography. My journey in photography has taken me through various journeys, from capturing the beauty of landscapes to the intimacy of portrait photography. What I love most about photography is its ability to tell stories and evoke emotion. I find inspiration in the play of light and shadow, the intricate detail of the world around us, and the unique perspective that each photographer brings to their work. First is bracketing. Bracketing in photography refers to the technique of taking multiple shots of the same scene at different exposure settings. This is done to ensure that at least one of the images captures the scene with optimal exposure. Especially in the challenging lighting conditions, bracketing is commonly used in situations where it's difficult to determine the correct exposure settings for a particular scene, such as high contrast scenes with bright highlights and dark shadows. Here are a few situations where exposure bracketing can be beneficial. First, high contrast scenes when there is a significant difference between the bright and dark areas of a scene, such as a landscape with a bright sky and dark shadows. Bracketing helps capture details in both areas. Second, HDR photography. High dynamic range photography involves combining multiple bracket shots to create an image with a wider range of tones and details. Third, ambiguous lighting conditions. In situations where the lighting is changing rapidly or is difficult to predict, bracketing can help ensure that at least one shot has the right exposure. And lastly is artistic effects. Some photographers use bracketing to create artistic effects, especially in post-processing. For example, merging bracketed shots to emphasize certain details or achieve a specific look. Second is panning. Panning is a photography technique that involves capturing a moving subject while keeping the subject relatively sharp and blurring the backgrounds. This technique conveys a sense of motion and speed in the photograph. Panning is commonly used in sports photography, wildlife photography, and any other situation where you want to emphasize the dynamic movement of a subject. Here's a step-by-step guide on how to achieve a panning shot. First, choose the right settings. Set your camera to shutter priority. Choose a slow shutter speed. The exact speed will depend on the speed of the subject, but it's often in the range of 130 to 135 seconds or even slower. Use a low ISO setting to maintain image quality. If shooting in bright condition, consider using a narrow aperture or adding a neutral density filter to reduce the amount of lighting entering the camera. Second, select continuous focus. Set your camera to continuous autofocus mode. This allows the camera to continuously adjust focus as the subject moves. Next, position yourself. Stand parallel to the direction of the moving subject. Anticipate the path of the subject and pre-compose your shot. Next, start tracking. As the subject approaches, start tracking its movement smoothly with your camera. Follow the subject smoothly and steadily, keeping it in the same position within the frame. Next, press the shutter release. As the subject reaches the desired point in the frame, press the shutter release button while maintaining a smooth motion with the camera. Continue panning even after the shutter has closed to avoid sudden jerks. And lastly, review and adjust. Review your shot to see the results. You may need to experiment with different shutter speeds and practice your panning technique to achieve the desired effect. Consider adjusting your technique, shutter speed, or composition based on the result. Next is hide shutter. The shutter speed refers to the amount of time that a camera shutter is open, allowing light to reach camera sensors or film. Shutter speed is measured in seconds or fractions of a second, such as 1/1000, 1/500, 1/250. A high shutter speed typically refers to a fast shutter speed, where the shutter is open for a very short duration. Nextly, framing. Framing in photography refers to the technique of using elements within a scene to create a frame around the main subject. This can help draw attention to the subject, add depth to the image, and create a more visually appealing composition. Framing can be done using various elements in the environments, such as natural or man-made objects, to enclose, surround, or highlight the subject. Here are some ways to use framing in photography. 1. Natural frames. Look for natural elements within your environment that can serve as frames. This could include overhanging branch, doorways, windows, or any other objects that surround and highlight your subject. 2. Architectural frames. Buildings, bridge, or architectural elements can create strong frames. For example, you might use the lines of a building to frame a subject in the background or foreground. 3. Environmental frames. Use the element of the natural environment, such as rocks, leaves, or even bodies of water, to create frames around your subject. This technique is particularly useful in outdoor and landscape photography. 4. Foreground elements. Place object in the foreground to create a frame around your subject. This can add depth to the image and draw the viewer's eyes toward the main point of interest. Selective focus. Use a shallow depth of field to blur the foreground or background elements, emphasizing the subject and creating a natural frame. This is common in portrait photography. 6. Frames within frames. Explore the concept of frames within frames by using multiple layers of framing elements. For example, you might have a window within a doorway, creating a series of frames leading to the subject. 7. Use of light and shadow. Play with light and shadow to create natural frames. For instance, sunlight streaming through the branch of a tree can cast interesting shadows that frame your subject. Lastly, experiment with angles. Experiment with different angles to find the most effective framing for your subject. Move around and try shooting from various perspectives to discover unique framing opportunities. Lines play a crucial role in photography composition, influencing the viewer's perception, guiding their eyes, and creating a sense of structure or movement. There are various types of lines that photographers use to enhance their composition. These are several types of lines in photography. 1. Horizontal lines. These lines convey a sense of stability and calmness. For examples, include the horizon, a calm body of water, or the straight line of table. 2. Vertical lines. These lines suggest strength, permanence, and stability. For example, include tall buildings, trees, or other upright structures. 3. Diagonal lines. Diagonal lines add a sense of movement and dynamism to an image. They can convey a feeling of tension or energy. Examples include a diagonal path, a staircase, or a slanted tree trunk. 4. Leading lines. Leading lines are lines that guide the viewer's eye through the image towards a specific focal point. They are often used to create a sense of depth and draw attention to a particular subject. And lastly, implied lines. These are not actual lines but created by the arrangement of elements in the frame. For example, a series of rock or object arranged in a line can create an implied line. Patterns. Patterns in photography refer to the repetition of elements, shapes, forms, or colors in a visual, predictable, and regular manner. Incorporating patterns into your photograph can create visually engaging and aesthetically pleasing image. For example, natural patterns, architectural patterns, man-made patterns, textile and fabric patterns. Depth of field. Depth of field in photography refers to the range of distance within a scene that appears acceptably sharp in photograph. In simpler terms, it's the area in front of and behind the main subject that is in focus. Depth of field is controlled by several factors, including aperture, focal length, and the distance between the camera and the subject. Rule of third is a fundamental compositional guideline in photography and visual arts. It's a simple yet effective way to create balanced and visually interesting image. The basic idea is to divide the frame into a grid of 9 equal sections by drawing 2 horizontal lines and 2 vertical lines, resulting in a grid with 9 smaller rectangles. The key elements of the composition are then placed along these lines or at their intersections. So that's all from me, and that's all about presentation PCT. So bye.